Hey, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. Happy MLK Day. And this video is really about what I am observing today, and I observe every uh, January. Every January, this becomes increasingly uncomfortable to see people. Of course, they're posting their MLK tributes, they're posting their favorite quotes and things like that. And it becomes increasingly uncomfortable to me because as I grow older, and as I grew older and started to read way more about Martin Luther King and educate myself and not rely on what the schools had educated us on, I realized that it is easier and more comfortable to teach about the conciliatory pacifist MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., rather than the man who started to evolve and talk in a different way. So much in a different way that I believe it certainly contributed to his assassination at the age of 38. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. Every year you start to see his name trending. People will post the picture. They'll post the usual quotes, right? I have a dream, or, darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. The usual quotes. And please do not misunderstand me. All of his quotes are good. They all have context within them. But for the most part, it makes people more comfortable to post the ones that seem far more conciliatory, far more peaceful than what he had evolved into towards the end of his life, right? People rarely talk about the Malcolm X. See, here I go. People rarely talk about the Martin who wrote "Where Do We Go From Here?" And that's really important that we not ignore who he evolved into, right? Who he evolved into. Yes, Martin Luther King was the person that said that we weren't going to fight this hate with more hate, or it would be like non-violent protests. Yes, he was that guy, but he also evolved into a man who started to demand, not ask, he started to demand that this country make good on its promises and that they pay the descendants of slaves. I would even argue to you that that was more likely what got Martin Luther King assassinated than "I Have a Dream." Okay, they hated him, yes, we know, right? Now they want to pretend that they all loved him, but they hated him. But I personally feel like Martin Luther King was killed because of what he started to say and what he was demanding that this country do, as opposed to, I just want little black boys and little white girls and little white boys to play together. We know that that was a part of his legacy, but that wasn't the entire story. So much, in fact, that I became increasingly uncomfortable as an educator, even teaching about Martin Luther King, as I became more educated about him. Because growing up in school, I don't know about you, but growing up in school, I just saw one part of Martin Luther King, which made a Malcolm X seem like a complete antithesis of a Martin Luther King, which made us a lot of times feel like we had to choose one or the other. Either you were over here with Malcolm, which was we was going to fight back by any means necessary, or you were going to be over there with the "can't we all get along" Martin. And that is incorrect. It has been incorrect, but we didn't know that because we weren't taught that way. You understand what I'm saying, guys? So I became uncomfortable teaching about him because I felt like I couldn't tell the entire story. As an elementary school teacher, of course, you only get like a handful of African Americans to even speak on, right? If it's not Martin, it was Rosa, or Frederick Douglass, or Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth. You had a handful out. Now, they may have far more reach in high school. But again, who's writing the curriculum? Remember, there's some textbooks out here that's basically calling slaves just workers, right? So it depends on who's writing the textbooks, but we know historically textbooks have basically painted Martin Luther King as a pacifist and nothing more than a pacifist. They don't even talk about the sum of his life and that he moved towards saying, listen, black people, African Americans need to be compensated for building this country, and that people come over here from other countries and get way more, get land, get wealth. They get more than people who built this country. See, they don't talk about that. They don't talk about that, Martin Luther King. So I know that a lot of people, especially a lot of white folks, are comfortable, posting all his quotes, all his memorable quotes, all his loving quotes, but nobody will touch on what he was saying towards the end. Because then you would have to go ahead and acknowledge that he was talking about reparations, and people don't want to do that. People don't want to do that, right? So it's easier to talk about the conciliatory, pacifist sounding Martin Luther King and pretend like he didn't evolve. Pretend that he didn't evolve into something more, right? And he did. He absolutely did. Just looking back on it, I think about a lot of stuff that was a ruse in school and what we were taught, right? Hell, forever, I believed that Abraham Lincoln was a good guy because he freed the slaves, because he just thought it was morally wrong. Forever, I thought that Rosa Parks, she just got tired that day. She had been working a long shift. She was working a long day, and she just got tired. She was just tired. And that's why she didn't want to give up her seat. So many untruths and just lies, flat out lies that our children are taught, right? And at some point, like I said, I became increasingly uncomfortable even pushing the narrative that Martin Luther King, all he was an I have a dream speech. And he just wasn't. I mean, if you read Letters from a Birmingham Jail, like I said, where do we go from here? All of these are important things to read to understand just how much he had evolved and just how much he had changed. He didn't just want freedom, as Kamala Harris bullshit ass freedom. He didn't just want freedom, right? He wanted them to cut a check. Martin Luther King wanted them to cut a check towards the end of his life. Like, cut the check, pay African Americans, pay the Negroes. That's the word they use, of course. Pay the Negroes, right? We are demanding that you pay for the suffering, for the fact that African Americans built this country, all right? So they were getting increasingly uncomfortable. So I do find it interesting now, though. It is just amazing to see all the folks who hate all the other black people, right? 364 days of the year, they hate all the black people, right? But this one day comes around, and now they want to quote Martin Luther King. They want to quote Martin Luther King, and they want to quote the sweet quotes, the ones that make them feel comfortable, the ones that make them feel good about themselves, the ones that make them feel like he just wanted to get along. He wanted everybody just to get along. That's all he wanted. He wanted freedom, right? They don't want to talk about what he became and what it was. And it's always so interesting to see how much they love him now. But a lot of these folks that's around, 70, 80, even if they made it into their 90s, hated the shit out of him. Now everybody loves him. And I can only imagine what would have become had he lived. But I can imagine that he knows that he didn't have much, long for this world. Not in the work that he was doing, not in what he started to talk about. He knew that his days were numbered, but what's great is that he still has so much that we can pull from, so much that we could read to learn from. So I would implore you, if you have not ever read it, and you get a chance, read Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos, and that is written by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you will understand how much he evolved, and you will understand that this pacifist guy that they attempt to push on us year after year after year, he was gone. He wasn't asking anymore. He wasn't begging anymore. He was telling. He was demanding. And I truly believe that is what shortened his life. All right. I truly believe that. And, just looking, like I said, being a part of the American school system, of course, being taught by the school system, teaching in the school system, I just couldn't continue to do it. I personally would rather not even teach about him. I know that sounds terrible, but I would rather not even teach if I can't give, even just in an age-appropriate way, the full scope of who he was and what he had become. But, when somebody else is writing the curriculum, what are you to do? What are you to do? And so we'll have to keep believing that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, although it was certainly, that's not because he loved black folks, trust. And that Rosa Parks was tired, and Martin Luther King just wanted freedom. Go ahead and watch this clip at the end of this video, and you will understand exactly what I mean about Martin Luther King evolving and what he was demanding. And you'll see what I'm talking about, okay? You guys go ahead and enjoy your day off if you're off, and I will see you.
What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.